My name is Justin, and I am a son of God and an addict, and the host of the Reco12 speaker meeting. And thanks to my God, the steps, and the fellowship of other addicts, I am living in the relative happy, joyous, and free that is promised to those living in recovery, and have been very active in the rooms of recovery since September of 2013. Welcome to Reco12. Reco12 is an organization with the mission of learning and sharing the similarities of addiction of all kinds, and gaining and sharing tools and hope from others who are walking a similar path. We come together from all places, faiths, and backgrounds to gain tools and hope from others who are walking a similar path. Speakers from our past meetings have represented many fellowships and identify with addictions with such a variety as alcoholism, drugs, food, sex, gambling, theft, codependency, and all of the anon groups, just to name a few. We invite recovering addicts with at least 1 year sobriety and who are actively working their recovery in their respective fellowships to share their experience, strength, and hope on a live Zoom webinar each Friday at noon Central Time for 20 to 25 minutes. Then we, the live audience, get the opportunity to ask questions of the speaker for another 20 to 25 minutes. If you are hearing this meeting in recorded podcast form and would like to participate as a live audience member in the future, please go to www.reco12.com. That's RECO12.com to learn more and to submit your email address there to receive weekly invitations. By the way, in a couple of weeks, we had a speaker that had to back out and reschedule. So I have an opening for a guest speaker on the last Friday of June. I can't remember the date. So if you're interested, please send me an email at reco12pod@gmail.com. That's RECO12pod@gmail.com. And we can talk about that. All right. Reco12 is a self-supporting service, and we appreciate your help in keeping us working our 12th step in this manner. We greatly accept contributions, and I'll put the link in the chat of the live meeting and also in the show notes of the podcast if you would like to contribute. We look forward each week to receiving from the light reflected from our speakers. That light inspires hope, meaning, worth, and growth in us, the listening audience. Now, let's introduce our guest speaker for today, Esther C, whose chosen topic is Program is not about the don'ts, but the do's. Now, here's a little bit about Esther in her own words. She says, "My name is Esther C, and I am a grateful recovering lust addict, in other words, sex addict. I am originally from New York, but currently reside in Jerusalem, Israel. I am sober for 1 year plus and have been in the rooms for about 3.5 years. For me, it was not an easy route to recovery, but it is the closest thing I have got to having a home. Watching the promises come to life on a day-to-day basis has been such a blessing, and I can't wait to see what else is in store." Take it away, Esther. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Esther, and we're grateful recovering lust addict. It's really cool to be here and to reach so many people. I think it's amazing. So thank you for having me on here. So I figured I would start with a just quick introduction to me and you know where I come from. So I grew up very religious in a Jewish religious home. To think that like, as a child, I always felt like, well, when you grow up with religion, life is like amazing, right? But it really wasn't. In theory, it's nice. And people who do it right, good on them. But I was very much raised in a home where I'm grateful for the aspect of religion, because I think if religion and semi-morals weren't there, how much worse my life would be. So I'm grateful that the groundwork was there. But my parents' marriage was nothing to shout home about. And they specifically, you know how the joke is like when someone says, "Oh, you were unexpected. The child, like they feel unwanted, right? Because they weren't planned." I was planned, and it's a lot worse, in case you're wondering. I'm child number 6, and my parents were like, "Well, maybe if we have another child, it'll bring peace between us because, every time we have a kid, we have moments of peace." And I'm like, great, so let's throw another child into the mix. So that was my parents' situation. There was jail involved, courts, fighting, abuse. It's funny because as a sex addict, I always thought, okay, well, sex had to come from somewhere, right? I mean, there was lots of different types of abuse, but sex abuse was actually not in the picture. It was always something that intrigued me. And later on, I worked it through. In the beginning, my addiction didn't come across as an actual sexual addiction. It came across a lot of loneliness, needing somebody, wanting a family. I didn't have a solid family. Everyone was scattered and all over the place. And I think that in general, there are two forms of reactions to trauma in families. Either it brings the family closer together, or they completely just scatter. And mine was the latter. And I think because of that, I was just very, very lonely, and I needed someone. And so as a kid, I played with Barbies, and they all had to get married, and they all had to have babies, and all had to have families. And then like, if I ever read a book, I started getting into erotic literature, and they literally, someone had to have a baby in I don't know why, it was a thing. Like I would do like mistress books and like all these things where someone got pregnant. It was a thing. And I went to a school system where they ripped out pages of like the anatomy in the body in biology. And we had to get like minus on regents because we couldn't answer those questions. So it was that intense. And I would like go to the library. I had a library right around the block. It was amazing. I didn't have to cross any avenues. And my parents, if they ever asked, I was by the library. Mind you, I was sitting and reading erotic literature at the library. But you know, when you tell a parent you're by the library, it sounds great. So I spent a lot of time with erotic literature. Ironically, I've actually never really watched porn. I think I remember one time when I was like 14, vaguely like watching it and getting grossed out and just being like, no. I've never masturbated alone and like with myself. And it was just interesting. The progression of my addiction was very, in a way, subtle. Like everybody reached teenagehood, everyone's hormones were raging, and everybody moved on. And mine just got worse instead of moving on. I was obsessed with boys. I used to have a picture of this guy in my wallet. We weren't even dating, and I carried it around like everywhere. It was someone I knew, but and I almost got kicked out of school for it. And again, like it seems like subtle and small, but each little thing completely took over my life. Everything changed when I turned 20, and I actually I had sex for the first time. It was like God gave me a miracle. There were in addict terms, but it was like once I got a piece of it, I was done. I was screwed. And I was sitting there living a complete double life because I was completely religious on the outside. You know, we have morning rituals that we do. We wash our hands and all these things. And I would do that. I'd have sex at night, sleep with my boyfriend, and then wake up and do the whole ritual and do my prayers as if everything was normal and fine. And I knew I had a problem because it was literally taking over everything of my life. I wasn't working. I would sneak him into my work and we would have sex at work. Like the situations were crazy. And like, I kept breaking up with him. And like, it could be like 6 months, even 7 months where I didn't talk to him and I didn't have sex. And the minute like something was wrong and I reached out, it was sex that night. And it was like, and he was very much an S and I'm. Literally, I would tell him, I'd be like, you know, I'm using you, right? And he'd be like, as long as I get to spend time with you. And I'm like, okay. And obviously I lost complete respect for him, but I used him and he was there to use. So it was nice and not nice all at the same time. And I didn't realize how crazy I was. Like there was a point where I was like counting and I was like, oh my God, it's been 3 months without sex. And my friend's like, don't you think that's a problem that you're counting down how long you haven't had sex in? And I'm like, no, why? I'm proud of myself. Like that was, I didn't realize I had a problem. I knew I couldn't stop, but I didn't realize it was anything serious. I even to the extent, this is like a proof of some of my insanity, was I had a therapist. And at some point we decided not to work together anymore because she felt that I was using her as an excuse to keep doing my behaviors. And then like a year later, I wasn't with my ex anymore. And I was like, okay, great. I want to come back to therapy. I really have things I want to work on. She's like, great. But we have to make a contract that if you go back to your ex, it's over. Which, by the way, don't ever go to a therapist that makes a contract, just a side point. So I was feeling very unsafe, but I did it because I wanted therapy. Okay, this is the right thing to do. And before she left on vacation in the summer, she takes a vacation. Before she left, I was like, listen, I'm not feeling so safe with the contract. She goes, great, we'll talk about when we come back. I'm like, okay. And of course, I got back together with him while she was on vacation and came back and got kicked out of therapy, which was really traumatic because I already have abandonment issues. My mom didn't talk to me for 5 years and like all these things. So it just added. So I had all these issues. How I got into program was finally I was in a relationship. My ex, he's like the one main ex. I was on and off with him for 5 years. So he finally was leaving the country. But at that point, I was only together with him. I was trying to convince him to leave the country because I didn't see another way of me not talking to him and not having sex with him, which by the way is insanity in itself. So I convinced him to move to America. I was like, no, you need to go to America. You don't like it here anyways. And I convinced him to move. And I promised him that if he booked a ticket to America, I would stay together with him until he left. And during the last few months, obviously I wasn't emotionally in the relationship. So instead I got emotionally involved in a different kind of relationship. And we would talk about things. And it was actually a guy from my childhood that I grew up with. He was 16 years my senior. And I had a crush on him since I was 14, like massive crush. And supposedly he had a crush on me and he felt really inappropriate about it because I flirted away because obviously. And anyway, so we started getting into like an emotional relationship. And when he found out that I had had sex the week before, all of a sudden he disappeared. And I was like, oh, okay. And I was unsettled. Now for that next year, on and off, I had, sex with a guy that I was close with and this and that and all these things. But I really wanted to know what went wrong in that relationship. And I ended up, my sick brain wanted to know. Obviously, when I say it now, it's really clear. But I went back to America at some point and I called him up. I said, listen, I'm coming to America. I just want some closure. Can we just talk? And he basically said to me, he goes, okay, fine, we can talk. I'm like, great. And basically I met up with him and he told me all about SA. And, us manipulative addicts, he's great. He was so manipulative. So he says to me, he goes, so, I think this would be good for you. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm not a sex addict. And he's like, no, but you know how you say you have an addictive personality? You watch a lot of YouTube, you watch this, you do this, and you do everything obsessively. I'm like, yeah. He goes, this helps with everything. I'm like, okay, great. And so I took down the information, all innocently going in there. And I took the information. I tried to attend the meeting. It didn't work out in New York. And then it fell to the wayside. I got back to Israel. I ended up getting back into a different relationship with a guy. And I saw I was hurting him. It was a guy who was very religious. He didn't want sex before marriage. And I ended up forcing him into sex multiple times. And he would literally wake up in the middle of the night crying, saying, I promised God I wouldn't do this again. I promised God I wouldn't do this again. And it was ripping at my heart. Now, something to know about me is my codependency is probably stronger than my sex addiction. And I felt so guilty for what I was doing towards him that I emailed the SA Jerusalem Fellowship. And right away, I got information and I got involved. Now, this part of the story is really important because it's very entertaining. So I went into a meeting. Now, as I said before, I've never masturbated, never watched porn. Now you're coming to the Jerusalem Fellowship where majority of the guys are porn and masturbation. You have these really religious guys and they come to school for the year, and it's so hard for them because they're trying to stop and be super religious. So they've all done porn and masturbation. Most of them have not gotten physical with others and, sex with others. And I walk in there and again, they have to the newcomer. But my first meeting was not a newcomers meeting. I don't recommend this to anyone either. I went in, someone said, you have to get to a meeting right away. That's what you have to do. And I'm like, okay, I'll come. It was someone's first year share. Now this person has been to jail for molesting and all these things and no judgment, but come as a newcomer who literally only had sex within relationships. And I walk in there and I'm freaked out. I'm sitting there going, I'm not a sex addict. What am I doing here? And obviously I can't leave in the middle. So I'm just like sitting there and freaking out. And the person who led the meeting said the most beautiful thing in the world, which I share at every newcomers meeting because I think it's so important, is he gets up and he goes, listen, this is a very extreme story in SA. There are, different extremes. And he said, I just want you to know if anyone feels I would never do that, it's not I never did it, it's I haven't done it yet. And that freaked me out because as a religious girl, I never had access to 14-year-old boys. Who knows where I could have gone and what would have happened if I had access to 14-year-old boys. I happen to like younger guys. My MO, I'm 30 years old and I go for the 18-year-olds. What happens if they're 15 or 16? And all of a sudden it's illegal and I could be arrested for that. And literally this was just churning in my mind. And once that sentence was said and my mind started running, I was like, I'm home. This is my place. And now I feel like when people come into program, I don't know other programs, but I noticed a lot in SA, there are two personalities. You either have the person who talks about everything they do and are super open about it and tells everybody about everything, or you have the person who did everything in private and nobody knows a single thing about what they're doing and it's all in secret and hidden. So obviously I'm the first. You can tell just by me talking. And where it says to the newcomer, it says, caution, do not tell, right? I was the person who shouted it from the rooftops. I was like, oh my God, I joined this amazing program. Now, the thing that I had an issue with in the beginning, I did not work the steps. I did not get a temporary sponsor. I came to meetings. I loved connecting with people and I loved hearing that there are people who have the same issues as me. And that's a beautiful concept. It is. And fellowship is amazing. And I'm going to talk more about that in a little bit. Just also trying to keep track of time. But I'm going to talk about that more in a little bit. But to me, it was a problem, because throwing yourself in there in the beginning is really important. And the thing that I struggled with the most in the beginning is I kept going to meetings and I felt like everyone was really depressed. It was like, well, I can't have sex and I can't do this. I can't watch movies and I can't lust on the streets and I can't have sex and I can't watch porn and I can't flirt with whatever, you know? And for me, like, my fun was flirting. Like, even put sex aside, flirting was the best high ever. Like, it was like being an alcoholic and going to a party and feeling all tense and uncomfortable and taking a sip of alcohol and just letting go. That was like flirting to me. It was like, oh, okay, now I'm good. I'm flirting. Someone's flirting back. We're good. I can keep going. And that was fun to me. That was my fun. Inappropriate jokes. That was my humor. Like, how do I get by without sex jokes and flirting and all this? And that's what I felt the rooms felt like. It just felt very heavy, very negative, very all the things I can't do, right? Because we're told we have to be sober. But what does that entail? That entails not having sex, not doing all these things. So it was very, very difficult for me. And I remember this one guy came from Toronto. I don't remember his name, but he did make an impression. So that's a start. He came from Toronto and he came to speak. And at the end of speak, I walked over him and I went, I want what you have. Do you know of a female who has what you have? Like, it was literally, he was so expressive and talkative and fun. He seemed happy. He seemed like, the 12 promises that we read were coming true for him. Like, I read them and I was like, these are never going to happen. And like, it seemed alive for him. And I was like, I want this. And I think that was the start to my proper sobriety. Yes, I still struggled. I was on and off with sobriety. I think my hit point was 2 weeks. I feel like at 2 weeks, I was like, I got this. Okay, I'm good. And then completely, I didn't have it. I think it was 2 weeks and 2 months. Those were like the negative points. But I definitely started getting more involved and in a better headspace when I asked for a sponsor in something that I wanted. I found something I wanted. And through him, I ended up getting my sponsor, my first sponsor. It didn't work out in the long run, but I had like good bouts of sobriety with her. I kept losing it. And I think a lot of it was because I was still in that stubborn phase of not listening to my sponsor. Like, my sponsor was a backboard, it was like with a basketball, and I would throw it in the back and like it would bounce back at me. And the ball was in my court. I just kind of threw it to like get a feel. And it was an amazing experience, though, to actually find a group of people who were happy to be in program, who, when I introduced myself, I say I'm a grateful recovering lust addict. Now, lust is a separate thing because to me, I actually struggle with all the three main lusts, not just sex itself. It's food, money, and sex. So I call myself a lust addict to remind myself, because thank God I'm at a point right now where I'm totally okay not having sex, totally okay with it. But it's the lust behind it. But what I say is I'm a grateful recovering. And in the beginning, when people would say it, I thought they meant they're grateful that they're recovering. It's a beautiful thing. It's a program. And I ended up speaking to someone about it. And I realized it's not, I'm grateful I'm recovering. I'm grateful I'm an addict. I'm grateful that I happen to be recovering with that addiction. And I was able to then go back in the process and be like, literally being an addict kept me alive. The things that I went through in childhood, like in Judaism, we're told to be like positive about our what we have and the good, to see the good and to be grateful for what we have, and and other people could have it worse. It's not that bad kind of situation. And I think that stuck me in a place of like, you don't have it that bad. Like your reactions to everything is extreme. Like, it's not that bad. But looking back and like having pity for that child that went through that, my childhood was traumatic. And all those things that I went through, I would not have gotten through without the lust. The lust was my safety net. The lust was my solution. It was there for me, and it allowed me to get through all the different stages in my life and the difficulties that came up. I mean, having a mother as a teenage girl at 12 years old, not have a mother in her life, like, that's really traumatic. And what did I do? I turned to boys. That was the exact start, the stages where I started turning to boys. And I needed somebody. And, my father wasn't there as a father, which is a whole separate story. And he was the one in jail. It was fun stuff. But I literally was to me, it was like, that is what I needed at the time. Until for me, at that point, I was hurting others. And once I saw how much I was hurting others, I couldn't continue like this. I had a problem. Now, again, I also feel that's a big part of the reason why I didn't get sober right away in recovery, because I didn't come for me. I came because I was hurting somebody else. And until I actually got into the problem, I got a lot worse in the beginning. I went through relationships. I ended up getting into a relationship with a married guy, which was like a never for me. Like, that was like a real bottom line for me. And then I had like a one night stand, which was like a real bottom line for me. And because I came into program with someone else in mind, I was first learning what disease I actually had and how bad it could actually get. I don't recommend anybody to try it, but it really did teach me a lot about myself, because it taught me how powerless I am and how much I needed the program. And I came in and I just realized, like in the beginning, how I wanted that positive sobriety. And the question was how to get it. And as I said, fellowship was a big thing for me. But the times that I soared the most was when I was willing to let go of my ego and take a step forward and do action. And I actually, this is not necessarily particularly in regards to this, but I think it was so important to say, is that in the beginning of my program, there was a lady who came in and she used to call me for questions. She was new. And later down the line, like 2 years down the line, I heard her speaking and I was like, I want what she has. And I had to literally break my ego and take away but she came into program after me. She used to come to me for advice. And I had to break that away and ask her to be my sponsor. I think that was like the biggest turning point. So for me, once I took her as a sponsor, so she actually didn't end up having time and she gave me someone else in program as a sponsor. And she actually, this relationship has been amazing. I listen to her. I do what she says. And you know what? That doesn't mean I don't question her. I'm not a blinded kind of person. I'm not very into like the close my eyes and just follow, leap into faith kind of person. Never have been and never will be. But that to me is also what the beauty of program is it works for every person. Every person, there's a different path to take in program for every person and what works for you. They say take what works and leave the rest. And that's a big thing for me. And my sponsor, I remember there was a girl in program who used to like tease me about my sponsor, be like, your sponsor is not your sponsor, da da da. My sponsor is really free thinking. It's like, well, what do you think? How do you feel about that? How would God have you move forward with that? I want you to sit for 10 minutes now and then call me back and tell me what you feel God would say in this situation. And like, for me, I was upset. I wanted someone to tell me what to do. I was like, no, just tell me. So she was like very free and floating. And I ended up having to find my way in it. And in the beginning, I had a very hard time trusting myself because as an addict, I couldn't trust myself, right? But as I learned to work my steps and work the program and take the actions I needed to move forward, I was learning that I could trust myself. That if I have God on my mind and I'm working the steps and I'm in a place of a healthy place and a place of recovery, I can trust myself. And that was a new concept. I got into a lot of trouble because I trusted other people over myself. And I ended up getting into trouble with that in regards to dating a guy, long story. But to me, that was a big thing. So I tell everybody, work the steps. Am I the biggest procrastinator on planet Earth? Yes, very much so. I've been in program 3.5 years. And besides for like the quick little workshops, which I've done all those workshops where get the 12 steps done in like 2 days or like a month, which is great. But actually working through the steps, I'm on step 5 and it's 3.5 years. So I'm definitely a procrastinator, but to me, it's taking the action. As long as you're doing something, as long as you're actively doing something, not passive, not sitting back and waiting for things to happen. I'm not like that. My personality is do. You got to get up. You got to take an action. They say like when you hear a beautiful speech or something amazing and you listen to it, you need to take an action right afterwards, because if you don't, then it was nice in theory and it was really nice in your brain and it was nice to listen to. But unless you take something away from that and say, I'm now going to do this because of it. And it could be a teeny little thing. It could be like, I'm going to now not look at my phone for 1 minute a day because of what so-and-so said, right? It is now an action that you can now forever take with you. The other thing that has an amazing thing, and everybody makes fun of me for talking about all the time, and I don't know if Aaron's here, but he likes to tease me a lot in regards to marketing this. But I think that every fellowship should do this, and it is amazing. We created something called a fun committee. in Jerusalem, where we get together and we organize fellowships and workshops and conferences. And a conference obviously is that's an obvious thing that everybody, does, but we literally do little workshops. We've done, we fellowship after every Sunday night meeting. We go for pizza, all of us together, and we chill and we talk and we connect. And then we have once a month where one time we went pottery painting. One time we did a game night. It was so much fun. We did like a whole game night in someone's house and we all just chilled and joked around. And we have somebody speak at every one of these fellowships. So it's not just uncontrolled fun. It's fun. It's learning to connect with others. And, like I joke, I'm like, we do camping trips, right? I mean, I'm an SA. Okay. So think about sex, men, women, right? In SA, we go on camping trips. I am a female and there are males and we all sleep together outside, not with each other, but outside, and nothing happens. It is the most beautiful thing in the world. It is a gift that program has given me, and learning to connect with others as human beings. And I remember, again, this is nothing against people who do this and feel this is what's best for them. But I remember somebody came over to me once and they were like, you go mixed hikings and you go mixed activities and like, what do you feel about all women's meetings? And I'm like, I am completely against. And I said, as someone in SA, one of my biggest struggles is objectifying somebody, especially growing up in the religious communities where you're not allowed to talk to men. You're not allowed to touch men. Men are like these things behind a veil, behind a curtain that you can't talk to. And then you're supposed to marry them when you turn 20 somehow. But it's literally, they're an object. So if I'm segregating myself into a female meeting, I'm continuing the behaviors that I've been doing my whole life of objectifying men and saying, you're an object, I cannot sit in the same room as you. But when I sit in a meeting with them, I learn who they are as people. I get to hear their struggles and their pain and see how they're just like me. And I go to hiking trips with men. I do karaoke night with men. And obviously some of them don't attend because religious things with, religious men won't hear religious women singing, and it's a whole thing. And that's their choice. For me, program and connection is the most important thing. And I love it. Service is, I can't explain to you how important service is. I mean, they say service keeps you sober. I don't believe that's fully true, but I think service keeps you connected. The reason why I don't feel that's fully true is that service keeps you sober is because I've been a secretary to a meeting, lost my sobriety after 7 months, and had to lose the position. And it is a blow to my ego, really is. But it's not about that. It keeps me connected. I do service. I run a meeting. I'm able to stay focused, especially for someone who's ADD, by the way. I recommend you all lead meetings because you have to the entire time focus on how much time you have to share, who you're calling on. You don't have time for your mind to float in random places. So it actually keeps me in check. But it's also, I being part of the fund committee, organizing it all, right? I'm connecting with people. I'm bringing people into the fold. I'm when I do a workshop, I love it. I love getting information, and I'm the perfect person on these committees because I'm the ADHD advocate on all these committees. Like you have a conference where everyone just sits at a table and talks, and I'm like, the person who has ADD, we cannot sit for more than 10 minutes. Like you guys are all just sitting there talking for an hour, and like I can't do that. So let's figure something out. So I put like workshops in where we fill in charts and games and meditations and all these kind of things where like I can actually enjoy it and help others to enjoy. And I know that from the feedback that I get, how much people appreciate that. And like I had someone, I couldn't go for this, I said Sunday nights we go to this pizza shop and we all chill after the meeting. And 2 Sundays in a row I couldn't go. I had events and I didn't go. And someone was like, you were you were such a part of it that it was so missed that like it felt like we were missing part of the meeting, like a leg from our body. And I was like, I love that. I love that I can connect to people and have a relationship with people at this point that is truly genuine. There is no sex involved. There is no inappropriate joking. There is no flirting. There is literally nothing. And it's like, wow, that I can connect to another human being and have a relationship with another human being outside of, of all this. And like, for me, it was the most beautiful thing in the world. And I am just really, really grateful for everything that the program has given me and everything that the fellowship has given me. And thank you for having me on here.
Thank you so much, Esther. I love your energy. I love the spirit that you bring into your recovery and into your share. Just great stuff. Kept me, ADD. I was focused. I was like, woohoo, this is good stuff. Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing so much about SA and your fellowship and how it helps you. A reminder to our live audience, we've gotten several questions already. But if you have questions for Esther, please type them in the Q&A link at the bottom of the Zoom window. Looks like two speech bubbles over the top of each other, and we'll get to as many of those as we can. I've also written several questions in case we run out of questions from our audience, but they're coming in. So anyways, we will start off with a question that came in even before you started speaking, and I think this is a good one. This is from Scott H. He says, how do you detach from a partner, one who has been you've been enmeshed with for so long? And then the next part, how and what would you consider a relapse in SA?
Okay, so the first part, anon. Just go to any anons. Go to ACA, anon, CODA, anything that involves codependency and enmeshment. It happens to be there is a program called SLAA, which I love the concept of it. Personally, I stuck with SA because it was more structured. But SLAA is Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, and it deals a lot with enmeshment. To be honest, it is very hard for me to explain what to do because my sponsor and I just focused a lot on boundaries throughout. My a lot of my relationships I couldn't end sexually. Like a lot of the relationships I ended up in sexually was because of my codependency. I couldn't get out of them. I got into them because of my addict, and then I was disgusted them and repulsed by them because that's what happens when I use my drug. I then have resentment towards them because I used them. And I didn't know how to get away from it. I couldn't break away until I got to that point of like real anger and disgust. And it came from a terrible place. And I would break up with them in these angry bouts when really it could have ended nicely because this is just not going to work. And my sponsor and I worked a lot on boundaries. My recommendation, as I said, anon, ACA, CODA, any of those kind of things that deal with relationships and your codependency and enmeshment within relationships, as well as therapy. Therapy was a massive thing for me. It happens to be, I think SA helped me more than my therapy did, but I think therapy got down to the core of the emotional aspects of what was going on. And then I was able to take the steps forward once I had the knowledge of what was actually going on. Really worked to help to work on my self-esteem, really a lot. My shame inventory, I mention this also all the time. Not everybody does a shame inventory. I think everybody should do a shame inventory. You can Google it. It's not technically officially part of the 12 steps, but it is. Like it's been brought in. It's a chart, just like you do a resentment chart or a fear chart, you do a shame inventory. And that shows you, the guilt that you feel and all these feelings that you feel, where it's coming from and what you should do instead. So that is that. The second part is, what was the second part of the question in regards to SA?
Yeah, it was, how would you define what would you define as a relapse in SA?
So that's a tough question. I actually wrote an article on it. There are two parts of sobriety. You have no sex with self and others. And then there's progressive victory over lust. I have always struggled with that one. And I think that's really hard because there's no definition. There's literally no definition because, you could be great and then watch porn and then be like, well, I watched porn. It's not progressive. It's not going upwards. I'm done. But that's not life. Life is a heartbeat. Life goes up and down and up and down and up and down. And to me, I say like what your trajectory needs to look like when you look at it is heartbeats going up a mountain, right? It's the heartbeats, but not straight. You want to see that you're getting up there. And my sponsor was always on top of me about this. Every time I'd be like, yeah, but I'm struggling so hard. And, and she's like, but would you have done that 3 years ago? Would you have done this? Would you? And she would go back and be like, progressive victory over lust means looking back and seeing a progression. And there's a concept of slips and there's a concept of actually acting out and losing sobriety. And there are people who put, personally, again, this is not something I believe in, who put additional things onto their sobriety definition. SA does not have that. People do that on their own and that's their choice. I think that that's a very big letdown because there is a disappointment in losing sobriety, whether we want to admit it or not. Yes, program is a day-to-day and it's not about, the sobriety number. It's about the day-to-day, but ultimately the sobriety number does affect us. And I think that by losing your sobriety, by having a slip and by putting things in there that don't need to be there, it gets sticky, in my opinion. but which is why I stuck with SA, because I like the solid definition of this is what it is. So progressive victory over lust to me is everybody has their negative places. That's life. But even while you're in the negative place, if you can look back and see that this negative place is higher than your other negative places, that to me is a progressive victory over lust. How to define losing sobriety with progressive victory over lust? I do not have that answer. Go to your sponsor.
Yeah, I find that helpful all the time. Sponsor, what's your take on this? And then my sponsor, much like yours, well, what does God say?
Exactly.
Go to God. All right. No, good. All right. So we have another, thank you for sharing that, by the way, Esther. I really appreciated that. We have another question that came in from an anonymous attendee who asks, what took you from the willingness to get a sponsor to deciding to work the steps? Did you have to block the past sex partners, or were you able to refrain on your own? So another two-part question. So start with the first one. What took you from the willingness to actually working the steps?
So willingness strikes and then it fades, and then it hits and then it fades. So to me, it's kind of like the concept of strike it while it's hot. You're willing to do it. You get the sponsor right away, take a step. You speak to your sponsor, immediately do something with that. As I said, it's about action, not speaking, right? So let's say you find this new sponsor, you talk to her on the phone, you have introductions, you get to know her, say, give me something to do for the next time. Don't just walk away and be like, we had a great conversation. We'll talk next week, or we'll talk in 2 days. It's, we had a great conversation. What can I do for the next time we speak? Because it's about action. If you don't put it into action, you're going to lose it. So that's my opinion in that. Even like for me, I'm a procrastinator. As I said, my sponsor always laughs at me. I actually almost didn't graduate high school, not because of my grades, but because I never ever did homework. And my principal was like, I can't graduate you. I'm like, why? I passed all my finals. And she's like, you do realize that it's part of the curriculum. I'm like, well, what can I do? And she's like, you can write 3 massive 100-page reports. I gave it to somebody else to do. It was great. Anyways, they did the reports. I gave it in. And I technically graduated. I'm not sure how honest that was, but I did. So I don't do well with that. So it happens to be with my sponsor personally, we do things on the phone together. On the phone, we go through my step 1. On the phone, I answer questions with her, and I have to write it all down, and I actually do the work. But she's just there present with me so that I can actually do it. So it's really about finding the best way that works for you in regards to action. The second part of the question was, again?
Did you have to block the past sex partners, or were you able to refrain on your own from reaching out to them or making contact with them?
So my situation was interesting because, as I told you, there was a lot of resentment involved by the end of the relationships. By the time I was acting out with them, there was a lot of resentment in there. I had a very hard time, honestly, very hard time. My niceness and my codependency, I don't want to block somebody. That's so mean to block somebody. So I wouldn't block them. And then somehow we'd start talking again. It was a lot of going on. And I remember I have one guy who, call my qualifier. He literally, it's not even my ex. My ex I kept going back to. And once I moved on from that, I moved on. Once he was out of the country, that was done. I have one guy that is literally, he is my drug. He is a drug to a scary degree. And I would tell him, I'm the kind of person where I don't necessarily reach out. But if there's an inkling of an opening, I go for it. So let's say this guy, right? We were friendly, lives in the neighborhood, great, really nice. And the two of us are fireworks together, like explosion from the second we met. I'm pretty sure he's SA also, but he tried it and said it was a cult and walked away. But that's his choice. But it was insane, our relationship. And finally I was like, hey, don't message me. He's like, hey, fine, I won't message. He's like, I don't need to be friends with you. I don't need to talk to you. One of those, guys, like, I don't need you. I'm fine without you. I'm like, okay, fine without me. And I wouldn't message him. And then he would send me a message like, oh, I saw a job that you may be interested in. And he would send it to me. And then a whole relationship would start all over again. And I was like, I told you not to message me. He goes, what do you mean? It was just an innocent message. And like, that shows how much of he's my addiction. I can't take a little hit and then I'm good. I can't. He sends a message, I'm gone. It's all in, all back with the emotional stuff and the messaging every day and talking about appropriate things, like all back in. So I also wrote an article about this fun stuff. So this was actually really, really important to me. My sponsor said a line to me that everybody needs to process. I used to tell her whenever she would say, block him. Okay, this guy I was crazy close with. And she's like, block him. And I'm like, I can't do it. Finally, at some point, she's like, I've had it with your can'ts. It's not you can't, you won't. And I just stopped for a second. And I was like, The minute you turn something into I won't from I can't, it's all of a sudden in your control to a certain extent. So I can't. I'm out of control. I can't do it. I won't. I'm choosing not to. So the next time the situation came around and he was talking to me, I'm like, oh, I can't block him. I'm like, no, I won't block him. You know what? I will. And boom, I did it like on the spot. And it was, for me, again, I'm very action on the spot. If I don't do it right now, it could be like, oh, that's a good idea. I'll block him. No, it needs to be done in the second, in the moment. And I can, but I won't is one of the biggest slogans now in my life. I can, but I won't. So yes, block everybody. I don't block everybody, but I block the people that I need to block. And I was able to tell that I wasn't in the greatest spot a couple weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, where I saw my block contacts and I went in and I was like, I can unblock him. We haven't been messaging for that long. I'm like, oh, call my sponsor. And I quickly went, I called her. I was thinking about blocking him. So yes, I recommend to block people. If it's something that's not in your way, then good for you. I have a bunch of people that I've acted out with in the past that aren't in my way and I don't block them. It's the people who take a toll on my recovery and are in my way to live the happier life that I want.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Esther. I appreciate that sharing those experiences and that wisdom gained through experience. All right. Reminder to our live audience, if you have questions, type them in the Q&A at the bottom of your Zoom window, and we'll get to those. All right. Next question came in from Hillary H. Hillary says, when do you see these promises begin to become true for you in your recovery?
Oh, I have no clue. I could tell you a specific moment that it was clear. I think it was happening all along slowly, but I wasn't aware of it. I remember one time I was in therapy and I was like, yeah, these 12 promises are crazy. And I read it out and I was like, I paused and she goes, did you notice you had at least 4 of those? And I was like, I think I had like 6 or 7. And I was like reading them out and I thought I was going to prove how it's crazy. I could never have these promises. And then I read them through and I just was like, I think it's a conscious thing. I think that to some extent they come true at different points for everybody. And it fades, just like everything in life fades. There are ups and downs. And there are times where you don't necessarily feel the 12 promises as much. And there are times where you feel them more. And I think it's about conscious. And I think it's, the concept of gratitude and connecting and recognizing. So, when I hear them being read in a meeting, right, you have the optional choice at the end of the meeting or beginning of the meeting to read it. I stop a second and I listen and I'm like, okay. And it's amazing. Like, to me, one of the most beautiful promises in the world, it's not an exact promise, but to me, as I said, like for me, the flirting and the fun and the this and the that, my perceived version of fun. I remember there was a guy who was still actively in active addiction. And at some point he was messaging me something inappropriate and I just responded 1-word responses. And he goes, you got so boring. I'm like, good. I was like, if this is what boring is, I'm like, my personality will never be boring. I'm not a boring person. But if to you boring means that I've lost the need to flirt and to this and to that, good on you. Like, good on me. Like, I am grateful for that. So I think a lot of it is just being in touch with it. And the more you read it and the more you connect with it, the more you actually see it step by step in at least for me, in my day-to-day life, step by step. And it's beautiful. And one of my favorite promises is not regret the past, nor was to shut the door on it. And that was like, I thought that was never going to come true. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm the most like guilt, shame filled person on planet Earth. And I did everything wrong. And I felt terrible about what I did. And I rethink everything I did 1,500 times. I'm the person that like lies in bed and remembers the thing I did 4 years ago and like have shame from that. Like that's literally, what keeps me up at night. And it's amazing how slowly, like, again, there are days where it comes back, but on a general day-to-day basis, I love my past. I mean, sometimes I do tell people I wish I was really naive. Sometimes the concept of naivety is just a beautiful thing, but I would never trade what I had in my past. I would never trade the instances, the situations I went through, the choices I made. And I'm going to mention this, even though someone else mentioned it. Someone mentioned it on one other podcast and I loved it. And it's such an impact on me because, I have a babysitting group in my home. So I literally watch kids on a day-to-day basis. And I'm at that stage where they're learning to walk, which is the most beautiful stage in the world. And someone gave an example in life where he said that a parent is watching their kid learn to walk, right? And when they fall, they don't get yelled at. They don't get punished for falling. you cheer them to get back up, and you got this, we got it, whatever. And I live this on a daily basis. So when he said that line in regards to our shame and our what we've done in the past and the things that we did and how God relates to us, I was like, I feel this on a day-to-day basis. I work with kids who I'm literally encouraging to walk, and they trip, and you're like, I'm so sorry, let me help you back up. You know what I mean? I'm like, you got this. And so like it hit me so strong. So that was just the point. And I know this was a lot of ADD off track things, which is fine. I hope that helped.
Totally fine. Your energy just brings it in, and I love it. All right, we have another question that came in from our live audience. This is from Ben. Ben asks, and I think this goes along. I love how you, and I'll get to the question here in just a second. I love how you talked about having your meetings integrated, men and women, and what you find the importance of it is, because so often objectification of the opposite sex, objectification of the same sex, whatever my attraction is part of that. And if I don't have a mixed meeting, I'm never going to get over that objectification. That's a really interesting concept, and I appreciate that. So this question builds on that. Can you please explain how and why it is possible for the mixed hiking, et cetera, to be safe and healthy?
It's about the focus. It's literally about your focus. So if someone's planning it to just go have fun and let's go hiking and let's go have fun with a whole bunch of people who are not recovered and who are going to go hiking. And oh, by the way, not just hiking. I don't know if I mentioned camping. Yeah, camp, like literally we sleep in this day, moved over. And I remember there was one guy on one of the camping trips who was uncomfortable. He's like, you're sleeping here tonight? I was like, yeah, if you have a problem with it, you can go. And first of all, the fact that I said that was like good on me, boundaries. Cause like generally my codependency would be like, I feel so bad. And by the way, that is how I felt originally. I was like, I feel so bad. I'm causing him to be uncomfortable. I should go. And I'm like, no, I have every right to be here. And half the times I was the only woman on a camping trip, and that's fine. But it's really about the setting of the tone. We have people who speak along the way. We have usually it's in Hebrew and in English. The hikes usually when we do them together. So it's two different languages. So we have one Hebrew speaker and one English speaker. And we have people with a lot of sobriety coming along. The entire thing is organized as a sobriety hiking trip. So sobriety, it's about the focus. It's about what you're putting your attention on. It's not about having fun. It's about connecting in sobriety, enjoying sobriety. You know, there's this is like a Jewish thing, and it's really hard to explain. I'm very into fun. I am. But in Judaism, it actually says there's no word fun in the Bible. There's enjoyment, there's connection, there's all these things. And the actual word fun itself, actually not in the Bible anywhere. And it's an important thing because, again, what your definition of fun is. To me, when I say fun, I mean something that's enjoyable and connecting and, you know, having a relationship with someone and building with them. You know, fun in the past didn't mean that. Fun in the past was like crazy, wild, drinking, you know, flirting fun. But it's not about fun. We're doing this to connect and to enjoy and to feel peace and to just love and to be present. And that's what it's about. So yes, we call it the fun committee, but we actually called it the funky committee. We changed it to funky committee, but it also just flows better. But but it's really just about the focus and what you go into it with.
Love it. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. A question from me here. You know, you mentioned the pattern of relapse in your life, you know, two weeks, 2 months, and other times. And many times it came up to this idea of, I got this, I've got this figured out. I'm now safe to use white book words or I guess big book words, changed into white book words, to lust like a gentleman or to lust like a lady. I'm now safe to do this. How do you now, when that voice comes in, how do you now deflect from that and move through that thought of, I got this?
So I actually, there are three things that I do to connect with this. One is I actually have 3 pointers that are quick pointers. It's like step one in many, where like I carry around always with me, not necessarily in paper. If paper helps, you can do paper too. But I have in my mind 3 things that I can spit off really quickly, offhand, why I'm powerless. You know, what proves I'm a sexaholic? That when I want to go into that phase of, am I really a sexaholic? Seems like I got this. I could do this. And it's like, remember when you had a crush on a guy and you slept and you were friends with him, but you slept with his roommate because you actually liked the guy. So So you didn't want to have sex with him because you actually liked him. So you had sex with his roommate to get rid of the sexual tension. Remember that moment? Or like that sexaholic, that moment where, I had a crazy situation and, when I first came into program, and at the time, my boyfriend, the one who I kept forcing to have sex, right? So with him, I literally, I was angry at something and I just like, I need sex. And I'm like, well, I can't have sex with him because he'd be hurt. So can I have sex with Maish? No, Maish is in America. Can I have sex with Hill? No, he's in America. Can I have sex with a candy shop guy? Really not comfortable. I'm like, wait, if I have sex with any of these people, it would also hurt my boyfriend. Like what? Because I'm not having sex with him? Like it just those little things that every time I think I got this, it's like, remember those moments. Remember when you thought you got it and you didn't. So that is a big, big thing for me. The other thing that's really big for me is always just remembering that when I think I've got this is, in a sense, reminding myself that no one and nothing is ever worth losing my sobriety over. And the reason for that is because even though it's not a direct correlation in regards to I got this, but it's in a concept of when I think I can lust like a gentleman or I can, get to those places, it's like, where lust leads you. And literally nobody or nothing. I'm like, go act out again. Okay. Slip, have a fall, go to your lust, have sex. 2 weeks later, will you ever say that the thing that you did was worth it? Ever. If there was ever a time, then go ahead, have fun. But there has never, ever been a time in my life where I go back and say that was worth it. I can say that was fun. I enjoyed it. Definitely wasn't worth it. And so that line to me is also very important, always in my head. And the other one is speaking it out. A big thing is talking things out. I always hated, I grew up hating that I talk so much. I talk a lot more than this, believe it or not. I've always talked and I hated it because I grew up in a system where women are supposed to be reserved and quiet and in the background. So I grew up hating the fact that I talk so much. And I remember one of the things I actually worked out in EMDR, if you don't know what that is, it's a processing therapy thingamabob. So a core trauma that I worked out was actually in regards to my speech, where I blurted something out when my sister had told me not to. Like my father had gone to jail. My sister's like, don't tell anybody, don't tell anybody, don't tell anybody. And then I literally just blurted it out in middle of class. And part of the process was recognizing that you were a child, you were a kid, you were 7 years old. How the heck were you supposed to process that your father was taken to jail? Your way of processing is by speaking. And I realized that I didn't have such crazy anger issues. And I think it was because, I believe it was because I spoke things out. My sister held everything inside and would emerge with anger and attack people and hurt people because she kept it all inside. And I think that talking and communicating and reminding, getting it out there is the most important thing. They say, make 3 phone calls a day when you first come in. I was terrible at it, but it's really important. And talking to people is really important. That's nice.
Awesome. All right. We have one more question that came in before we start wrapping this up. And interesting here from an anonymous attendee. I love the heritage and pride in Judaism. I was asked to leave a Jewish sobriety meeting because it might be offensive to others in the meeting. Can a non-Jewish person take part in and learn in a Jewish-only sobriety meeting, especially when learning about Torah in recovery?
So first off, if it was an SA meeting or a 12-step meeting and they kicked you out because you weren't Jewish, that wasn't a 12-step meeting, and that is completely not okay in any way, shape, or form. That traumatizes me because, they may have made their own thing, and that's really nice that they wanted to be a whole bunch of Jewish religious people in a meeting. That's beautiful, but that's not a meeting. It's not a 12-step program, and that's not SA. They could call themselves whatever they want. They could call themselves a support group. They can call themselves a workshop, whatever they want to call themselves. But that's not a 12-step group. No one should ever kick anybody out, ever. The only time someone should be kicked out is if they're doing inappropriate behaviors. And at that point, they're not even kicked out. They're spoken to. These behaviors can't continue. That's one. 2, I respect, especially in Jerusalem, right? So in Jerusalem, it's mostly Jews, in case you're wondering. And it's mostly religious Jews. Anytime there's a few Christian monks who come, who are in, here to work or study or whatever. There's 2 of them, and there's 1 Muslim. And when they come, I literally commend them. I walk out, I'm like, I'm really impressed with you guys. People say it to me as a female, right? I come in, right? Especially with religious men, and I'm the female in the room. There's one person who has 20 years of sobriety, and she's always in one meeting. But all the other meetings, I'm pretty much alone as the only female in the meetings. And people are like, wow, commendable. You come in, there's a whole bunch of men and you walk in. And I'm like, that's because I know I belong here. Okay, I'm a female. Who cares? This is where I belong. But you have people where there's a bunch of Jews and you have Christians and Muslims who come in. And I'm like, wow, good on you for coming back, not coming in the first place. That makes sense. The coming back is what I'm impressed with, because it is very difficult to sit in a meeting, and it is important for us to try to let go of the Jewish lingo. It's very difficult because we grew up, how Christians always say, Jesus, Lord and Savior, right? Like, it's hard to stop saying that even when you're in a meeting where it's non-denominational, right? So it's the same with us, but we have so much lingo. It's like crazy how much lingo we have. So it is very hard. And I do think it's important. Like, I hate when someone comes in and talks about their study partner and their days, and they're not all like in the, Jewish lingo talk. And I'm like, guys, this isn't a therapy session, a friend's chill. Like, this is a meeting. Sometimes do I give up trying to say things in English? Like, for me to figure out what a holiday that we just had, it's called Pentecost. Do you know how long it took me to figure out that it was called Pentecost? I mean, like, at some point I just gave up in the meeting and I said the Hebrew word. I was like, this was the holiday. But you should definitely be welcomed in any meeting that you go to. And if you're not, then don't go to it. Why would you want to be a part of something that is that? Because that's not what program is. Program is similarities and connection, not the differences. Who cares if I'm Jewish? I mean, like, to be honest, right now, there's something called the Sabbath, right? Beautiful time. You're not supposed to be on your phone. Technically, it is Sabbath for me right now. I'm on my phone because program is more important to me. And I know that the only way that my Sabbath can be beautiful right now is by connecting with all of you and sharing my story. So if someone is holding off because of Judaism, don't be a part of that. That's my personal opinion.
And thank you for sharing your Sabbath with us. We really appreciate it. Such a good meeting. Do you have any final real quick words of wisdom that you'd like to close out with before we go into closing reading and prayer?
Yeah, words of wisdom. I thought I gave a lot of those over.
Sounds good.
I thought I said plenty.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Esther. That was a great Reco12 weekly speaker meeting for all addicts and those wanting to learn more about addiction and the recovery therefrom. If we didn't get to your questions, or if you have other questions, please go to reco12.com/forum and join in our community there and ask those questions and answer others' questions that will come up. We also have a Facebook group that we do that in. I invite the audience to come back next week. If you've not yet rated or reviewed the podcast in Apple Podcasts, please go do so now. It's a great way to help us work our 12th step. Next week, we'll be hearing from JW, whose topic will be applying the 12 traditions to romantic relationships. Now, I'm excited to get some 12 traditions in here. I think it'll be really cool. And perhaps that can be one of our future series, as maybe one on the 12 traditions. We'll see. But now let's launch off into the rest of our day with the prayer of St. Francis, the step 11 prayer that Esther will be saying for us. And that's there in the chat, Esther.
Amazing. Thank you. To me, this is a beautiful prayer. And I know it's technically a Christian prayer, but to me, this is beautiful and exactly what I want to ask God for. So, Lord, make me a channel of thy peace, that where there is hatred, I may bring love, that where there is wrong, I may bring the spirit of forgiveness, that where there is a discord, I may bring harmony, that where there is error, I may bring truth, that where there is doubt, I may bring faith, and that where there is despair, I may bring hope, that where there are shadows, I may bring light, that where there is sadness, I may bring joy. Lord, grant that I may seek rather to comfort than to be comforted, to understand than to be understood, to love than to be loved. For it is by self-forgetting that one finds. It is by forgiving that one is forgiven. It is by dying that one awakens to eternal life. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Esther. That was so good. All right. Keep coming back, everybody. Come trudge this happy road with me. Work it. You are worth it.
Definitely.
You did really well. Thank you so much for that. And I really appreciate it. Your energy is contagious. You and I, we share a lot in common.
Standing still a moment, carving out this time, reflecting on the landscape grip of this life of mine. Peaks too high to conquer, streams too wide to cross, troughs too deep to walk through without incurring loss. Yet here I am, still standing tall, despite the rough terrain. One like me survived the storms and walked through wind and rain. Still standing, I will fight the good fight. Still searching for glimmers of light. Feet still on the ground, I can still be found. Standing still.
My wings are torn and tattered, but I know I still can fly. I may not soar unfettered, I may not rise too high.
Recorded in the book of life and binded with the seal.